My name is Talia Dunn, 31 years old, and 3 weeks ago I discovered that the family inheritance contract doesn't have my name on it. I wasn't snooping or chasing rumors. I found it during a valuation project for a client in Austin. The property address on the deed matched my grandmother's old ranch outside the city, the one I thought still belonged to my father. When I checked the county registry, the title had been reassigned to Benjamin Dunn, my brother. At first, I assumed it was an administrative update, something routine. But the file attached to the deed wasn't a simple transfer. It was labeled Family Asset Allocation Agreement 2018. The signatures were all there. Richard Dunn, Martha Dunn, Benjamin Dunn, and then blank space where mine should have been. I stared at it long enough for the screen to dim, as if the document itself was asking whether I was sure I wanted to see this. My hands didn't shake, but my jaw did. That evening I called my mother. She answered on the second ring, cheerful at first, until she heard the edge in my voice. "Mom, I came across a contract today, the one for Grandma's ranch. My name isn't listed." There was a pause long enough to measure the distance between blood and truth. She said softly, "Your father handled all that. It's just paperwork." "Honey," when I asked why Benjamin's name was on it, her tone stiffened. "Because he's the one staying close to family. Don't dig into this, Talia. It'll only cause trouble." I didn't respond. The call ended in a blur of static, her voice fading like the hum of a ceiling fan after power cuts out. I sat at my desk with the file still open, watching my own reflection in the monitor. The blue glow made my skin look unfamiliar. I thought of every dinner where my father praised Ben for being the responsible one. And every time I'd laughed it off because keeping peace seemed easier than keeping proof. But the proof was in front of me now. Notarized. Signed. And perfectly legal except for the part where I no longer existed. The morning after finding the contract, I called my mother again, hoping she would tell me I'd misunderstood. Instead, she sighed as if my curiosity was a burden. "Your father handled Grandma's estate," she said. "He knows what's best." I told her that leaving my name off an inheritance didn't sound like what was best for anyone. Her reply was short. Clipped Talia. "Don't turn this into something ugly. Let it be." By noon, I'd called Diane Monroe, my closest friend since college, and now a civil attorney in Travis County. She met me at a cafe downtown, the kind of place where people whispered about lawsuits over coffee. When I slid my laptop across the table, she adjusted her glasses and read the file carefully. "This isn't just a transfer," she said. "It's an agreement. And whoever drafted it knew exactly how to make it look legitimate." She pulled up the county database, typed a few codes, and frowned. "It's registered, signed, and filed 4 years ago, which means it's binding unless we find something wrong with the addendum." The word addendum stuck with me. I asked what it meant, and Diane explained that it was a supplemental clause added after the original estate plan. "My grandmother's will," she said. "Couldn't have included it because the handwriting and witness dates were newer. Your dad must have attached this later," she murmured. "It limits the beneficiaries to direct male heirs. In Texas, that's not enforceable without the consent of all parties." I felt my pulse in my throat. "So he couldn't legally exclude me," Diane shook her head. "Not without your signature." I sat back, the cafe noise fading until only her words remained. That evening, I reread the contract on my couch, tracing the place where my name should have been. It wasn't a clerical error, it was deliberate. The clause read, "All properties under the Dunn family estate shall be transferred to the direct male descendant to preserve legacy continuity." My father's pen strokes were dark and confident, each curve of ink a quiet decision. When I called him, he didn't sound surprised. "You've been doing well on your own," he said evenly. "Ben is the one who'll maintain the land. It's practical, Talia, you understand numbers. I said I understood math, not favoritism. He ended the call without a goodbye, leaving silence where an explanation should have been. Later that night, I printed the document and placed it beside my grandmother's photograph. Her eyes in the picture seemed to know what I'd found. The ink on that paper wasn't just my father's handwriting. It was the blueprint of a plan built years before I was meant to see it. They hadn't forgotten me, they had calculated me out. I showed up at my parents' house on a Thursday night. The air thick with the smell of roast beef and something unspoken. My father sat at the head of the table, sleeves rolled up. The same posture he used when explaining taxes to neighbors. My mother poured wine with her usual nervous smile. Pretending not to notice the folder in my hand, I placed it beside my plate and said evenly, "We need to talk about Grandma's ranch." My father's fork paused midair. "What about it?" he asked. I told him I'd seen the contract filed under his name, the one transferring ownership to Ben alone. He didn't look surprised, only sighed as if I'd interrupted a television show. "It's handled," he said. "Ben's taking responsibility for the land. You've built your own life in Austin. It's fair." I told him fairness usually required consent, and my mother's hand trembled as she set her glass down. Ben shifted in his seat, eyes flicking between us. I turned to him. "Did you know I was excluded?" He hesitated. "Dad told me it was what Grandma wanted." I slid the paper toward him. "She never wrote that. I've seen the original clause." My mother's voice rose, brittle and sharp. "Talia, please don't do this at dinner. You're ruining a family meal," I said calmly. "A family meal doesn't erase a forged document." My father's jaw tightened. "Watch your words. No one forged anything." I told him Diane had checked the registry. The addendum was added years after Grandma's passing, with only his and Ben's signatures. My mother leaned forward. "You're twisting this. We did what's best for everyone." I asked who everyone was, because it clearly didn't include me. My father's tone turned cold. "If you plan to make this a legal matter, remember who you're dealing with." I said I remembered perfectly the man who taught me contracts mattered more than promises. The silence that followed was louder than shouting. My mother reached across the table, pleading, "Talia, don't destroy the family over paperwork." I told her it wasn't paperwork, it was the erasure of my name. Ben looked down, muttering, "You're overreacting." My voice didn't rise, but it cut through his. "If someone removed your name, you'd call it theft." My father stood, pushing his chair back. "This conversation is over. You're not going to lecture us about family values." I gathered the folder, still untouched, and said, "I don't have to. The contract already did." When I walked out, the night felt heavy but clear. Behind me, I could still hear my mother's voice asking my father what he planned to do, and his answer flat. Certain drifted through the doorway. "She won't go through with it. She's still our daughter." I didn't turn back. For the first time, that word didn't sound like belonging. It sounded like leverage. A week after that dinner, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. The woman's voice was warm, deliberate, and carried the kind of confidence that comes from never needing to raise it. "Talia, this is Evelyn Cross. I used to work with your father years ago when he managed trust portfolios. He mentioned your grandmother's estate back then, and I believe I still have a copy of the original paperwork." I asked how she'd found me, and she said simply, "Your father once told me you were the one who actually paid attention to details. I figured you'd want to know the truth." She emailed the documents that afternoon. The pages were scanned in perfect order, Helen Dunn's signature, 2 witnesses, and a typed clause that read, "All direct descendants of Richard Dunn are to inherit equally, without discrimination of gender." The line was clear, without amendments or annotations. beneath it. However, Evelyn had highlighted the absence of any addendum. He brought me that version 4 years later. She explained over the phone. Said he needed to update language for clarity. I remember thinking it was strange because the will was already airtight. I asked what he'd changed. He added one paragraph, something about preserving the legacy through male heirs. I didn't sign off on it, but he filed it anyway. When I told Diane, she exhaled like someone watching a slow fuse reach its end. That's alteration of a legal document after probate, she said. Not criminal on its own, but it voids that clause completely. You have a solid case if you choose to pursue it. I told her I didn't want a case. I wanted a record. Then we keep the evidence. She replied, let the truth stand where the ink once lied. Andrew read the file that night, sitting beside me without speaking for several minutes. Finally, he asked, do you want to expose him? I said no. I just want the truth to exist outside of his control. The next morning, I printed both versions of the contract, the original from Evelyn and the amended one from the county registry, and placed them side by side. The difference was a single paragraph. 23 words written in my father's handwriting. Enough to shift an inheritance and erase a daughter. I didn't need Diane to tell me what that meant. The proof was already breathing between the lines. My father hadn't just written a clause. He'd written a hierarchy. And now there was no way to pretend I hadn't read it. My mother's invitation arrived with a handwritten note that read, let's put everything behind us. Family is family. The card announced a reunion dinner at a restaurant in downtown Austin. The kind of place meant to impress people more than feed them. Andrew told me not to go, but I knew why I had to. When people build a lie long enough, they start decorating it. I wanted to see how far my parents had gone with the furniture. The restaurant glowed with polished wood and low laughter when we arrived. My father stood near the bar, greeting relatives like a man campaigning for office. Ben hovered beside him, accepting congratulations for the new Dunn property. I heard my mother say to an aunt, it's such a relief when your children work together instead of competing. I walked up before she could see me and said quietly, that must be nice. She froze, her smile snapping into place. Talia, you came. I wasn't sure after everything. I told her I came for dinner, not reconciliation. We were seated in a long private room where crystal reflected every sound. Across from me sat Evelyn Cross, her expression calm, her invitation clearly not accidental. My father began a toast. Tonight reminds us that family remains our greatest investment, he said. The Dunn name has always stood for integrity and legacy. The room applauded politely. I felt Evelyn's gaze meet mine, steady and sure. Then she stood, lifting her glass halfway. Richard. That's beautifully said, she began. Although I couldn't help remembering the original clause in Helen Dunn's estate, equal inheritance without discrimination of gender. You told me once those words defined your family. The clink of forks against china stopped. My father's smile faltered. Evelyn, he said. That was a draft. The language changed later for clarity. She nodded as if confirming a trivial fact. Yes. I saw the revision you filed. The one restricting inheritance to male heirs. Curious how it appeared after Helen's death. With only your signature. I kept the original copy. Of course. My mother's breath caught audibly. And Ben muttered, this isn't the time. Evelyn replied evenly. Then perhaps it's long overdue. My father's voice lowered. You have no idea what you're implying. I spoke before she could answer. She's not implying anything. She's reading. I pulled the printed documents from my purse and placed them on the table. This is your version. And this is hers. Same title. Same date. But only one of them honors her wishes. My mother whispered, Talia, please stop. I told her I already had stopped, stopped pretending the truth was negotiable. The silence that followed felt heavier than any argument. Relatives exchanged uneasy glances, unsure which version of the family they were supposed to believe in. My father leaned back, pale and stiff. "This is humiliation," he said quietly. "No," I answered. "It's documentation." Evelyn excused herself with dignity, leaving behind a room full of people who finally saw what I had seen all along. My parents remained seated as the waiter cleared plates no one had touched. When Andrew and I stepped outside, the laughter from inside sounded distant, brittle, a sound built on the edge of collapse. He asked if I was all right, and I told him I was more than I had been in years. Behind us, through the glass, I saw my father raise his hand to his temple while my mother spoke to no one in particular. The dinner had ended the way lies often do, with everyone still seated, pretending nothing had fallen apart. But the truth was standing, and it wasn't leaving with them. 3 days after the dinner, the silence began to spread faster than the scandal. Calls from relatives went unanswered, and the only sound in my inbox was the echo of read receipts. My father resigned from the community finance board without a statement. Ben kept his head down at work after his company received anonymous messages about the altered contract, each one quoting the same 23 words that had erased me. My mother stayed home, posting nothing, as if quiet could rewrite what was already public record. I didn't reach out. There was nothing left to correct. The documents had made their own case, and the truth had no appetite for conversation. Evelyn sent a short message that said, "I hope you're sleeping better." I replied that I was. Diane checked once to make sure I had archived everything properly, and Andrew suggested we spend a weekend away. We drove south to Houston, rented a small apartment overlooking the bayou, and unpacked the kind of peace that doesn't ask for permission. One evening, while Andrew read on the couch, I opened my laptop and searched the county database again. The listing for the ranch showed a pending dispute flag, a note added by the clerk for document inconsistency under review. It wasn't my doing, but it was enough. I closed the browser and printed one final copy of the original contract, the one Evelyn had sent, and placed it in a plain envelope. When Andrew asked what I planned to do with it, I said quietly, "Keep it somewhere safe. Not because of what it's worth, but because of what it proves." Months passed, and the story faded into the rhythm of normal life. The Dunn name no longer carried weight at local events, and invitations to holiday gatherings stopped arriving. On a warm afternoon, a letter came from Evelyn with a single line, "Truth finds its own inheritance." I set it beside the photograph of my grandmother and realized I didn't miss the land, the title, or the family meetings filled with pretense. Freedom didn't look like victory. It looked like absence, no noise, no defense, just space to exist without condition. When I stood on the balcony that night, the city lights moved like slow water below. Andrew asked if I felt lighter now. I told him I did. "I didn't win anything," I said, "but I got back everything that mattered." He smiled, and for the first time in months, the word family sounded clean again. Thank you for staying until the end of my story. If it made you pause for a moment, share it with someone who believes freedom has to be earned. It doesn't. Real peace begins the day you stop asking for permission to exist. Subscribe if you want more stories that remember that truth.